Hi, today I would like to talk about books and literature and give you probably the most essential vocabulary on the topic. After watching the video, as usual, you can do a quiz and check how well you have learned it. The link is in the description of the video. In the age of smartphones, tablets and computers, reading as a form of pastime is on the decline. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 19% of Americans aged 15 and older read for pleasure, and 33% of high school graduates never read a book after school. In contrast, today we're observing a rise in television and video streaming platform viewing, like Netflix or Amazon Prime, which is probably the reason why people read less. How about you? Do you read books for pleasure? What are your reading habits? Write in the comments, please. Let's talk about the types of literature. Under the most general classification, books can be fiction and non-fiction. Fiction is a literary type of invented or imaginative writing. It includes novels, novellas, and short stories. Another word for fiction is prose, and it can be realistic or non-realistic. Realistic fiction describes events that happen in the real-world setting. And non-realistic fiction is the opposite, set in imaginary universe or employs alternative non-existent history of the world. Common fiction genres are classic, crime or detective, romance, fantasy, science fiction, horror. Non-fiction books deal with true stories, events and people, or at least the authors claim such narratives or stories to be true. As for the types of non-fiction, the following are distinguished: biographies, historical books, dictionaries, manuals, encyclopedias, essays, textbooks, cookery books, and others. In poetry, there are three main types: narrative poetry, dramatic poetry, and lyric poetry, and a work of poetry is called a poem. A poem can be in verse, which means possessing a metrical rhythm and rhyme, or may be free from limitations of regular meter or rhyme, and in this case it's called a free verse poem. Another meaning of the word verse is a structural part of a poem or a song. At school, children are often made to learn poems by heart and then recite them in class. A fiction story usually has a plot, which is an interrelated sequence of main events, and characters that can be major and minor. A bestseller is a book that sells in very large numbers. It often happens that you can see both fiction and non-fiction books as bestsellers. For example, in 2019, the novel Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens was on top of the list in the USA, with almost 1 million copies sold that year, while Becoming, the memoir of Michelle Obama, came second. Anyway, the best-selling author of all times is probably William Shakespeare, with estimated sales of up to 4 billion copies around the world. By the way, let's talk about writers. This is how they're called according to the type of literature they create. A writer or an author is the general term for all of them. Novelists write novels. Poets write poetry. Playwrights write plays. Journalists write articles in newspapers. Biographers write biographies. Screenwriters create screenplays or scripts for films and TV shows. And one of the most popular types of writers nowadays is a blogger who writes articles for his or her blog. Books can be printed or electronic, also known as eBooks. Printed books come in two types: a paperback, also known as a softcover or softback, which means it is bound in stiff paper or flexible card, and a hardcover, bound in stiff covers or hardback. E-books are distinguished by the digital format they have, such as EPUB or PDF for Windows and MacBooks, and for example Mobi for Kindle devices. You can buy a printed book in a bookshop or in the USA a bookstore, and electronic books in an online shop, for example Amazon. You can also borrow a book from a library and take it home or study it on site. Recently, libraries have become not just book archives, but also information hubs that contain both printed and digital materials. Finally, a few phrases to express your opinion of the book you have read. If the book was interesting and you were totally engrossed by it, you can say, "This is a great novel, I just could not put it down." That is a real page-turner. The book is a masterpiece. But if you are disappointed, you can say, "The beginning was so heavy-going that I gave up. The characters are one-dimensional and they don't really develop. There is no real plot, I didn't like it." This is all for now. I hope the video has been useful, and if you think it is, please leave your likes and comments below. And by the way, what are you reading now? Share in the comments, please. Can you recommend some really captivating story to read?